Thank you, everybody. Today I want to talk to you guys about, I think everyone's going to be talking a bit about technology, but my whole thing on technology is, as a creative guy who spent about 20 years in design, digital, and advertising agencies, if you think about technology for too long, it'll freak you out. So I think you need to look at the way you think about technology, because technology, to me, a lot of people talk about it being a tool. I wouldn't even call it a tool. I think it's a toy. I think it's a toy, and it's really relevant for this sandbox environment, because at the end of the day, people love toys, and they love to have fun with toys. And I think that, ironically, to me, technology is probably one of the best toys to enable you to make one of the most human connections and connect with people on so many different levels. And that's what I want to try to show you a bit of today. So I work in a group called the Creative Lab at Google, and we're a small group, and we are, I don't know, a couple dozen people in London, and we cover EMEA, but we have setups in New York, San Francisco, London, Sydney now. And our whole thing is to rethink the communications around our products and platforms. And technology obviously plays a major role when we do that, because what we're trying to do is effectively bring this stuff out in the most innovative and creative ways and show people what can be done. So we work right across things like Chrome, Android, Google+, Google, YouTube, and I'll show you some of that stuff right now. And no easy feat, but our remit at the end of the day is to try to invent the future. What we fundamentally believe is there's two things that you really need to understand, and when you pull them together, you create a bit of magic. So you really need to understand people. You really need to understand this complicated world that we live in, and everything that we can do to help people navigate this place. And then when you really understand fundamentally what your products and your platform's all about, and that magic within them, when you combine the two, it creates something quite special. I wanted to talk a bit about structure, because I think structure has a lot to do with how we approach things at the Creative Lab. And my group is very, very, very small. I have a creative, I wouldn't even call it a department, but I have 5 guys called the Google 5. They're all interns, what you would call interns. And again, in the agency world, when I was starting out as an intern, I remember I used to have to steal briefs off of creatives' desks and stay up all night and try to get stuff done. These guys work on the biggest stuff and the most difficult stuff, because they see the world in a very different way. And they work in a very unconventional format. They don't work as art directors and writers. They work as technologist, filmmaker, writer, art director, and designer. And then we bring in people like yourselves to help us bring this stuff to life and realize these ideas. And they work in this format because this is literally the process that we follow. And I'm trying to tell you a bit of our inside workings, just maybe if you might find it interesting. But we literally sit down as a group, and they make a poster. Believe it or not, at Google, they make a poster, because a poster will force you to think in a certain way. And it'll, the immediacy of seeing something on a piece of paper when you walk by and you go, I get it, I understand that. There's nothing complicated. Technology isn't used to kind of convolute that message. There is something compelling there, yeah? So one of the people, or a few of them in that group, will make a poster. Secondly, we'll make a video. The video will help create the brand world around that idea, so it'll help establish the tone of voice, the look, the feel, everything that we want to create for that platform. We'll mock it up very, very quickly, and we'll prototype it. And what's interesting, and again, I had to kind of rethink a lot of the ways and the things and how I worked in the past, because at Google, because it's such an engineering-led company, everything kind of follows that mentality, which is you come together, you do this huddle, you get stuff out very quickly, yeah? You get stuff to market rapidly, yeah? And then you iterate through the process and you make it better. So we don't spend tons of time researching and all that. We make stuff and we get it out there, and we see what people think about it for real, yeah? And fundamentally, all my people, 99.9% of the time, are making things. They're not in meetings. We have to bear the brunt of that. They're making stuff, so they're physically making things, and that's so important because you lose sight of that sometimes. This is my brief. It's not the easiest one in the world, but it's a really, really challenging one, because I think, again, yeah, you know, with technology and all these things going on and the rapid pace of everything and how it's moving, you got to remember that, you know, for us, it's about reminding the world about what they love about Google. And before I joined Google, I remember I'd see these things and I'd be like, wow, you know, the first time I saw Google Earth, literally, I was like, this is crazy, this is incredible. And then they do these lovely little doodles and they do these lovely little April Fool's Day pranks and these sorts of hoaxes. And I'd think, this is a brand that I really, really connect with. They get me. It doesn't feel like they're trying to sell me stuff, and they're trying to make my life a bit more interesting and fun. So that's our whole thing at where we work. So I just wanted to talk you through some stuff from right across our network. I'll show you some stuff that was done in New York at Creative Lab, our San Francisco data arts team, and then some stuff that we worked in London with one of your local creatives, Eitan Hyatt. So I'll show you some stuff that we did over there as well. So the first one is how do you use technology to invite the world to play with your brand? And brands are interesting. Again, I spent a lifetime trying to convince people that your brand is sacred. Like, don't mess with your brand. Don't let people touch it. You know, you make it. You create these things called exclusion zones. I mean, you know that means keep people away from it. And it's all about what you want to stand for and what people have to kind of subscribe to if they want to be part of your world. Now, we know that's kind of like upside down these days because we don't dictate anymore what people decide and what people tell other people. They dictate that. So I think, you know, what's interesting about Google is they realized pretty quickly, what if you kind of took a page that got millions and millions and millions of views on a daily basis and you used it to capture the zeitgeist and to pay tribute to people who were really, really important in society, in the world, and use that doodle, you know, what we call the Google Doodle, in order to do that. So this is what we did. So we created the first interactive and recordable Google Doodle, and this was done by a guy named Alex Chen in our New York team, again, to pay tribute to a famous icon called Les Paul, who did the Les Paul guitars. So I'll show you a bit of that. I think, you know, what's nice about that, there are a lot of people smiling, and I think when you can use things, and when you think about, you know, how simple that is, and how complicated it might be in the back, yeah, to be able to do that and load a page in real time and all that sort of thing. But there were a lot of smiles, and I think, you know, what's interesting about that video is it wasn't like chest beating and, you know, all self-congratulatory. It said a lot of people played with it, a lot of people had fun with it, yeah? And at the end of the day, 5.4 million hours of productivity were lost. Who cares? It's a bit of fun, you know? The next one is a tricky one because, you know, again, you probably go back and you sit in your offices with your clients and they talk to you a lot of the time about, tell people all about this product and the features and all that sort of stuff. And if you imagine Chrome, a browser, HTML5, WebGL, WebSockets, all this sort of kind of crazy stuff, how do you tell people about all that sort of stuff? Well, you don't tell them about it. You make something that uses all that sort of stuff and get people engaged with it. So this was done by Aaron Koblin and our team in San Francisco, our data arts team. So they thought, you know what if we sat down and we reinvented a format? The music video kind of hadn't changed since it was launched in the early days. I remember George Lois talks about launching MTV. It hadn't really changed. It had a very linear format. And I think what they said is, what if you took a bunch of really different skilled people. So Aaron with Crisp Milk, the director, with Be Real, the design agency, with the Arcade Fire, great Canadian band, and you mashed it up. And in parallel, you mashed it up with all these different things like maps and HTML5 and all this Chrome functionality, and you created a story, yeah? And this, for me, again, was a massive breakthrough because this was like that, and this is probably a really bad analogy, but do you remember there was a Planet of the Apes film where Charlton Heston, right at the end, he sees the Statue of Liberty and he says, oh my God, they finally did it. When I saw this video, when I saw this site, I remember saying, oh my God, they finally did it. They managed to get a really emotional connection between the browser and the technology and a human being. And they did that by allowing you to go in and revisit your youth through Street View, and it was bloody awesome. So I'm going to show a bit of that. And I'm just going to go back one slide because I've got a couple of things I need to tell you. Street View was launched in Israel recently, and it's a great platform for creative campaigns. Chrome is a huge browser among Israeli teens, and Israel is the second Silicon Valley. And we really, really need to outreach to the developer community because I know this sounds like a sales plug. It's not. I think it's really important, to be honest. And this is really, really important, actually. And I'm not being paid to say this. There are more engineers per capita in Israel, 150, than in the US, which has 70. So I think, again, putting all that sort of stuff aside, because it is a bit jokey, I think it's really important, though, because that is how you're going to end up in these interesting situations where you create a bit of tension and you sit with an engineer and he says, hack into the API of maps and kind of do this weird stuff using WebGL. And that's how that happens. It doesn't happen from traditional teams sitting down and trying to come up with a thought and build an integrated campaign. You got to create these really uncomfortable environments where you're doing stuff that has never been done before. And this is another interesting one. So this here was done, and to give you a bit of context, again, as I said, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and the last 10 as a creative director, I've been very fortunate. And then I get to Google, and there are all these smart kids everywhere. They're like half my age and twice as smart. That's kind of the ratio. And there's a kid, I shouldn't call him a kid, it's a bit insulting, isn't it? There's a young man, and he sits down and he comes up with this great idea. You know, YouTube is a really, really credible creative platform, but when you think about YouTube, there's still a big segment of the population that thinks about, you know, dogs on skateboards and kittens falling into toilets and that sort of stuff, and it's kind of not like that. It's not actually. There's perception and reality. So he has this idea, and it is to get the world to film a day in their life, yeah, and create a film, yeah. So very audacious, and he's an APMM, which is, I think, the equivalent of like a young junior account person in the agency world. And he has this idea and he pitches it and everyone says it's a great idea. And it doesn't matter that the creative director didn't come up with it, it's a great idea. And they make it, yeah? And Ridley Scott executive produces it. And Kevin McDonald directs it. And if you haven't seen it, it is a beautiful piece of film. So what does he do? So how do you use technology to ask everybody in the world to take a video of a day in their life on the same day, and here is a day in life in a day.
You fast
And again, I can't stress enough, like, the reason, if you've seen this, the reason you like it is because it's a story about humanity. You look at this stuff and you connect with it, yeah? It's got nothing to do with the back end. It's got nothing to do with this hosting platform and this video streaming platform. That's a facilitator, and that's what helps bring this sort of stuff to life. So I think if you start with this is this wonderful place that we live in, and that's the story that I want to tell, technology is going to help me tell that story. And this is the last one, and this is the one that Eitan worked on with us. And this is interesting. So how can technology be used to make science more appealing and inspire the next generation of explorers? And I think I've got a lot of creative people in this room, maybe some engineers, maybe some developers and science-y people. But science arguably isn't deemed as kind of sexy as the creative business. And I think what we were trying to show is that there is this world that is incredible out there that science plays a massive role in. And we honed in on space. Because space is cool, and it's such an incredible thing. And we showed how science could help, space could help bring to top of mind this whole wonderful world of science and help inspire the next generation of explorers. And we did this by going to schools and saying, come up with some interesting science experiments of things that you would love to see done in space, of all places. And we did it with NASA, and we did it with Stephen Hawking. Professor Stephen Hawking was judging. And it was, again, incredibly audacious. This idea came from an ops guy named Zahan, and he loved space. And it was one of those things that was so hard that it was worth pursuing because it was just going to be the coolest thing if we could pull it off. And we did manage to pull it off, and it ended up pretty cool. But yeah, like going to kids and saying, send your stuff to space. And we sent a bunch of stuff to space, and it was brilliant, to the International Space Station and stream live the astronauts performing the stuff. And then there was some cool stuff like you could launch a rocket from Street View outside of your house. So it was giving the perception that you're launching your experiment. Another fact, yeah, they're not sales little anecdotes, these are facts. Israel was the number one in submissions per capita, which is cool. I mean, that's pretty big. And number 5 in absolute numbers out of 90 countries. That's pretty good. I think that's really good. So this is Space Lab, and this is the launch video.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have different, but it's very pretty out here.
And I think, again, like, when you leave here, I don't want you guys to go, yeah, these guys at Google, they can do whatever they want, they just do this stuff. We had a client, and that was Lenovo, and Lenovo acted exactly like your client. They made an investment in a program, and we had to deliver against it because it was a good investment. And so we had to do UDLs and display, and I'm going to show you the whole integrated thing right now. And when you get it right, I think it does have a fundamentally strong idea, this whole premise of science experiments in space. That combined with, I think the creative turned out pretty good. And then the way we promoted it across all the different platforms that you'll see in a second. The channel is still live, and the channel has 53 million views, which is pretty crazy, 53 million. And to give you context, in the UK, which is about 60 million people where I live, that's the equivalent of every single person in that country having gone to that channel. So it's pretty powerful. So I'll just show you a bit more of the campaign. That's it. So thank you very much for inviting me out and for listening.